Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sim, and I'm the head of content at Unlimit, and you are our latest guest for our Journey to Success series, and it's incredibly exciting. Could you please kickstart us with an introduction about who you are and your career journey so far?
Sure. Hi, Sim. My name is Bagas. I am Director of Market Insights at Measurable AI. We are a global company, but Hong Kong-based tech company that focuses on collecting e-receipts from 3 million users across the world, but mainly in Southeast Asia and Latin America. And with those receipts, we actually give important insights on like consumer behavior and competition to like e-commerce companies, ride-hailing companies, and fintech companies, as well as like some investors as well. So it's like a really, really unique way to get like market research, right? Because usually what a lot of companies do is they do a lot of surveys, whereas like we provide like actual transaction data from e-receipts, you know? That's what I do, right? And me, myself, I am Indonesian by origin. Like I grew up in Indonesia, but I lived in US and Singapore. And now I'm in Hong Kong for a couple of months, but we'll be in the Netherlands soon. So it's a bit of a long journey, like a lot of countries, right? So when I was in the US, I was studying at Cornell University. That's where I did my bachelor's in global development. So sort of funny, well, and interesting, I guess. So I wanted to like, quote unquote, change the world, right? So I did like a major in understanding why some countries are developing and why others are like mature economies, and what do we need to do to those developing countries to make them develop, right? And ended up like sort of questioning the entire industry, the entire concept of development, right? Because like, is it really like, do we really need to have all that economic growth for people to be happy, right? And I think it was just like a big mind opener to me, like, okay, so if I don't want to work in this industry, like what is it that I really like about the world, right? And I realized that I really like data, social science data at the time. So for example, like sociological data, you know, like why are people behaving in certain ways, and what kind of like variables, what kind of, you know, is it because of their origin, like country origin or gender, or you know, like a lot of other variables that can affect behavior, right? So I was really into that, and I realized that, okay, so I really want to be in this, you know, field. So I did market research, you know, which is like a really applied research in a sense. So I joined this luxury market research consulting company called Agility Research and Strategy. So it's sort of funny, right? Because I was studying like the developing countries, and then I switched into like understanding like luxury consumers and like luxury brands like Chanel and Gucci and all that. The reason why is actually, I was also quite interested in like luxury products and luxury brands. Like I think the concept of luxury is quite interesting, right? Because in the past, like people would buy luxury goods because they're like for status reasons, right? But then, you know, in our generation, I mean, you know, millennials and Gen Z, right? They would buy luxury goods because they represent their identity, or they want like freedom, and they represent like, you know, sometimes irony as well, right? So I was really into the whole thing, like to understand why people buy luxury goods, right? Again, it's about the data, understanding behavior, right? So that job actually was mostly Asia Pacific coverage. So like China, India, Southeast Asia, Japan, right? And understanding like how and why people buy luxury goods. I moved to the Economist intelligence unit, which is quite a big British institution, right? From the Economist group, the same group that publishes the Economist magazine. So it was a really big jump, because from luxury, I went into healthcare, research and consulting. So what that means is like, if you are a medical device company and you want to expand to certain countries, so they would go to us and ask like, okay, so what's the market size like? Like how many people, how many hospitals are there? And how do I enter the market successfully? Things like that. So it's a really big change. And I think the reason why I did that was because I was so curious about the entire world, right? I really wanted to know about different industries. So making that jump was like, it made sense to me at the time, you know. And it was The Economist, right? It has a big brand name, and until today, I still read a lot of their research. And I think, you know, a lot of people grew up reading the magazine, right? And yeah, so it's like a dream job in a sense. But then I realized that, you know what, like doing this like consulting and research, like it's nice and you know, it's really intellectually stimulating, but I kind of wanted to do like other things. Like, I kind of wanted to try out like other jobs or other, you know, other paths in life, right? So what I did was I did my master's at ESSEC Business School. So it's one of the best business schools in France. But you know, they have a campus in Singapore where I was at the time, and I went there doing marketing management and digital strategy, which is exactly what I wanted to do, because it's like, you know, at the time it was 2019, so there was so many like tech companies like on the rise, right? Like Uber and Deliveroo and you know, like DoorDash in the US. Like during this time, like there were so many opportunities, I thought, right? And believe it or not, I actually got one of those opportunities at Grab in Singapore. So Grab is a Southeast Asian super app. So what super app means is like it has everything, right? So from ride hailing like Uber to like food delivery like Deliveroo. And it also has like a digital wallet. So in Southeast Asia, like, you know, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, right? A lot of people are not banked. So it's different from like Europe, where people are, I'm sure you know this because you work for Unlimited, right? So a lot of people don't have a debit card or a credit card. So, you know, what Grab does basically is they provide like a method for people to pay, right? Beyond just using cash. QR code payment, right? Essentially. And a lot of other financial products as well. So at Grab, like I was really fortunate because I spent like 3 years of my life there, and I had a lot of really great teammates and you know, great mentors. And what I did was, again, data related. So basically like insights on the industry and external everything external that affects the business, right? So for example, like where are the opportunities, right? What's like the competition like in different Southeast Asian countries? And I really was involved in a lot of the planning, and that was quite nice to be in. And I think that actually led me to my current job as a director of market insights, because I'm working for Measurable AI, and basically there's a lot of it's like a research. So we provide data, right? Basically, and we provide this data to a lot of companies in the industry, like e-commerce and you know, food delivery and ride hailing, right? So basically, it's like a data provider for these people, and that's why like my experience at Grab, the Economist intelligence unit, as well as agility research, like they really prepared me for my current job right now. And right now, so basically, I work with a lot of our clients, which I cannot share, of course, but so a lot of them in e-commerce, in ride hailing, and food delivery. I think, you know, they really appreciate the data that we provide, right? Because again, it's not based on like surveys or whatnot. It's based on actual transactions, which is like something more valuable, way more valuable. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. That you've had an incredible journey living in different countries and so many different like careers. And The Economist is an incredible organization to be a part of too.
Right.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you. I mean, so from all of that experience, because you do have so much of it, over the years, how have you actually seen the process of collating data and insights evolve over time? And how and what technologies have supported that? Obviously, I know you'll say AI, of course, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Great question. So basically, I think all the different methods are valid, right? Like, and I think there's no, of course, like since I work in this industry in my current job, e-receipts to me are the best, right? But other methods have their own strengths, right? So I would say like think of it as like 4 different quadrants, right? So on the right side, maybe you have like what we call primary and secondary research. And on the left side, you have like quantitative and qualitative, right? So what primary research means is basically you collect the data yourself, right? Secondary research means you get it from someone else or somewhere else, right? Quantitative means that you get like statistics and like numbers, whereas like qualitative is more like descriptive. It's as simple as that, right? So this is like the basic of market research, the basic of like how you get the data for your insights, right? So if you look at each of this quadrant, right? So you have your primary quantitative, primary qualitative, right? And then you have secondary quantitative, secondary qualitative. You know, and all of that has different methods to get the data, right? So maybe I'll just focus on the quantitative primary first. So in the past, like the best way to get this quantitative primary research is through surveys, right? So you might have heard of the big names, right? Like that starts with N or starts with K, right? So these players, they would send like online surveys, for example. And the reason why survey was the most accurate was because the best way at the time was to ask people, right? Like there's no other way to see their like transactions history or like their preferences and all that, right? But now like we have so much secondary data, right? Not just primary, secondary data, quantitative, that provides this information. So for example, instead of asking people like, what did you buy like last week, right? With e-receipts, like you can actually, so sorry, maybe I should just specify what e-receipts are, right? So e-receipts are those receipts where that you get when you buy things online. So if you buy from like a fashion website, right? You get an email with a receipt in it. That's what e-receipt means basically, right? So if you have like a lot of those e-receipts, then as a company, you can know like what people are buying, how frequent it is, what is the value and all that, right? So you don't need to survey people anymore. And then, instead of asking people like, oh, what are you into? Like, what are your hobbies? What are your interests, right? You can just look it up like on LinkedIn, on social media, right? Things we call like social media listening now, And this is on consumer level, right? But on like B2B level, for example, if you are, let's say the Economist magazine, let's put the magazine instead, right? So you want to know like how much corn is being produced in the US this month, right? Like, okay, in the past, what would you do? You would probably ask like farmers, right? Across like 1,000 farmers. You ask them, okay, how much how many acres of land you have and how much corn are you planting this season, right? And then you multiply that with a number of like land in the US or something, right? But now you can just use like satellites, to see like how many like cornfields there are in the US. Like you can just like look it up using satellites. And the satellites are so smart and they're so advanced that they can zoom in to like different states, right? And they can actually count using like, remember what in math class in high school, like you got to like count like what is the area of a square or a rectangle, yeah. So these satellites can do that, right? And when that happens, you can multiply that area with like how how much space it takes to grow a certain amount of corn, right? So then you get like actual data, actual number of corn being produced in that particular day or in that particular month, right? So there's a lot of other ways to get data now, and it's not just survey based, right? And I think a lot of these survey companies, they also realize that actually. So they are diversifying their methods, and they are becoming more like adventuring into different businesses, right? So that's on the quantitative side, right? And then the other two quadrants is qualitative primary and qualitative secondary, right? So qualitative just means like descriptive things, like things that you cannot put in numbers. So like UX research, for example, is qualitative, right? Qualitative, I would say not much has changed, right? So you still do like a lot of, for example, interviews or focus group discussions or observations like ethnography. And, maybe you do like a lot of reading as well. Like if you want to know, like, for example, like Vogue magazine, like they have like an archive of like all their issues, right? Like since like 100 years ago, right? So you get to study like how the trend has changed of fashion in the past 100 years, for example. So I don't think much has changed in qualitative. I think maybe what I just mentioned, right? Like Vogue would have like a digital archive, right? But the reason why not much has changed from qualitative is because context and text are so, like, it's hard, like it's just such a human experience that I think like technology cannot easily capture that, So, okay, so for example, like what we're doing right now, like through like a video call, right? Maybe we can do like a focus group or interview that in that way, right? But actually, studies have shown that the findings of online interviews are not that great. Like you miss out on certain, like, I don't know, like social cues or observations, right? There's this thing too in focus group that we do. We tend to see who is the leader in the group, right? And what do the rest of the participants do when the leader talks, right? So things like that you cannot just observe online, right? So that's what I mean by qualitative being such a human experience. And I think quantitative can definitely tell you about like the what, the when, the where, the how much, right? But the why and the how, like you really need to do qualitative, right? You really need to interview people, ask people, observe people, or you read like a lot of text to understand why and how things are in this world. So I would say like a lot of the technology has mostly influenced quantitative research. And yeah, so I think that's how it has evolved and how the industry is so far.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. There's so much information to that as well. And it just makes me think, like, in doing your job on a daily basis, it must be so diverse because there's so many ways, like you said, to gather all of this information and to collate data and then to be able to digest it and redistribute it as well. So what is a day in the life? Like when you wake up and you go to work, what is your day to day?
So basically like, so with those e-receipts that we collect, right? So they provide like a lot of things. So think of like a receipt that you get, right? So it tells you what is being bought, what has been bought, right? It tells you like how much is the cost, is the price of that product, and it tells you the time and all that stuff, right? And if you combine that with like certain demographic data or other data, then you get like a clear picture of the consumer that you are trying to understand, right? So a lot of our clients, a lot of our partners, they may struggle in understanding that or trying to piece the puzzle together. And that is fair because a lot of the time they're also overwhelmed with so much data, so much information, right? So what I do is I try to bridge between our product team and our clients, right? So for example, our clients have question on like, let's say there's an investor who has been investing in certain e-commerce players, right? So sometimes these e-commerce companies, they send multiple emails for different stages of the delivery, right? So for example, if you buy things on a particular company, right, you would get the confirmation. Congrats, you got like your new like yoga pants or whatever, right? And then they would send another email saying, oh, it's on the way, right? And then they would send another email like, oh, it's still on the way, it's stuck somewhere, blah blah blah. And then finally it tells you, okay, it's been delivered and this is how much it costs, right? Or this is the receipt for that transaction. So obviously, like, all those emails should only count as one purchase, right? But sometimes data contains multiple emails that are actually for one purchase, for example. And together with the client, together with our partners, we make sure that our data is clean, right? And to make sure that if there is anything like this, we just count those emails as one transaction, right? And then use that one transaction to understand the consumer instead of like multiple emails, right? And I also try to find like new use cases for our data. So, and this is quite related to Unlimit, right? So fintech companies, there's a lot of them, right? As you know. And I think there's a lot of use cases for these e-receipts as well. And I think it's not just e-receipts that we get, actually. We also get a lot of like information that we get. And this is, I want to say right now that we are GDPR and CCPA compliant. So everything that I'm doing here is completely legal, right? So we get a lot of information on fintech as well. So for example, digibanks, digital banks, like we know like how much people are saving, for example, in different digital banks, right? And we know how much people are spending as well, because we get that information from their emails, right? So currently we're focused on e-commerce and ride-hailing and delivery companies, but in the future, we really want to expand to fintech, right? So I'm trying to not just get like fintech companies to talk to us, but also just understanding the different use cases of these fintech companies, right? And I think the way that I see myself, right, is like every company, every client that we have, they might be competing against each other. That's true. But you should be competing on equal footing, right? Or, buying our product is like a competitive advantage for you as well, right? So I feel like I'm helping everyone to understand the industry as a whole, to understand consumers as a whole. I guess like that's the way that I see it. It's like being like a librarian or some sort, or like being like a knowledge provider to these companies. Yeah. So that's what I do on day-to-day basis.
Great, thank you. It sounds like it's very diverse. Like it can be different every single day,
Yes.
depending who you're working with and what you're providing and what you're collating. So, but that must be so interesting. It must be amazing to be a part of.
Yes, for sure.
Great. So, I mean, especially because, of course, with measurable AI, and we've seen so much influence of AI in society as a whole, as well as like market insights and data collation. But what we're seeing more of recently, particularly in the world of finances, we see lots of like concerns over breaches of data privacy, and solutions like AI are often offered as a solution to these issues. How would AI offer secure data management at a global scale?
And I think I haven't touched on how we use AI, right? Maybe just a little brief explanation on that. So obviously, like when you have a lot of emails, like we have 3 million users in our panel across the world, right? Then you need AI to go through like the different receipts, right? That people get on their emails. So that's how we use AI legally, right? And I think this is something that we take very seriously, right? So as I mentioned, we are GDPR and CCPA compliant. AI is a great tool to understand the world, right? So, it helps us collect, like it can process so much more data than a human brain, right? For sure, right? But it could also be a bad thing. So let me just give you a personal experience. It just happened last week to me, actually. So my Singapore card got hacked by somebody in the US. Yeah, and it was, I asked the customer service of this bank, right? So what happened? And the bank said that there's this AI that could actually guess like the correct combination of your bank card, and it can try to correctly guess the CVV, and also try to correctly guess like the expiration date, right? And this AI is able to do this at such a large scale that even if the success rate is like 0.001%, you will still get somebody, right? And I was just unlucky in a sense to get this hack, right? Or I don't know if you can call it hack, because they basically guess, it wasn't a hack. It was like they guessed correctly using AI, right? And the funny thing is, like, I wouldn't have noticed, because basically they just like took like $5 or like $10 or something. But the reason why the bank noticed was because they also used AI to do fraud detection, So they were like, hey, this doesn't seem right. So apparently, like, it was a transaction at a hotel or something in the US. And I don't think it's for a hotel. I think it's like, money laundering or something. But anyway, so the bank noticed this, like, hey, like he hasn't been in US, right? Like, and there's no proof that he's been in the US recently. So why is there a transaction in the US, right? So because of that, the bank was able to block my card right away, right? And I was so happy that happened, and I was so relieved, right? And this is what I'm trying to say, right? So AI can be good and bad, right? So it can be used to guess your bank information. It can also be used to protect you, because it can detect fraud and all that, right? So obviously, when something can be a weapon or a solution, then you need regulation, right? So that more people will use it for good, right? So which is why, like, we believe that regulation is good, right? I think personally too, obviously, I think regulation is good. The EU is doing a lot of good work on this, right? I think the EU is leading the way on AI regulation. So I think regulation is the way to go. Without proper regulation, I don't think AI can succeed. And the other thing too about data privacy, right? I think because we are GDPR and CCPA compliant, right? Whenever we collect this data, we never use like PII. We never like show the PII, right? It's always like aggregated data, because we don't really care about like who you are, right? Maybe we care about your demographics, like where you live and all that stuff, right? But we don't want to know your individual detail, right? So we never show those, and we make sure that we collect these receipts legally. We're actually not the first in the world to do this, but we are the first and the biggest in Asia Pacific and Latin America, right? So yeah, I think data privacy, again, is also about regulation. So following that regulation is key. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with what you're saying. And I'm so sorry that happened to you with your bank card. That's so unfortunate. I think we've all been there, unfortunately. Yeah. And like you said, it's you're right in the fact that AI has such vast potential. It can do incredible things at uncanny speeds. But if not regulated and if not used appropriately, of course, it bears risk. But I think, like you said, as long as it is moderated and controlled through regulation and policy, hopefully it will be able to just bring benefit. But we're still in that middle ground of trying to find that space. So, like, with all of your experience, there's so much that I could ask you, but one of the main things is it's more of a personal level rather than like industry. It's more about like your journey through your career. And it's over the years, you've built up this wealth of knowledge and this wealth of experience. And now you're in this incredible position of like director of market insights. So now working in that role, do you always feel comfortable in gathering the information and forming a strategic direction for the business? And if so, how have you built that level of confidence? And how do you overcome any fears and concerns that you might have? You're smiling. So
Yeah, yeah. It's a very valid question, and I think a lot of us in the industry have faced this issue, right? So essentially, we're not just selling data, right? We're selling trust as well, because like stakeholders and leaders make actual business decisions on our data, right? So for example, like if you are an e-commerce company, you use our data to know, like, how many discounts should I give to my customers this week, right? And that could mean like profit or no profit, right? So we always stick to the science, right? To the math, because math is universal, and I was not really great at math, honestly, when I was in high school. Like, I mean, I was good at statistics, which is why I'm in this business, but I was horrible at geometry. I was horrible at like all the other stuff, calculus. Oh, yeah. But anyways, so math is universal, and we use that, right? So what we do in the industry, right? So basically, we need to have sufficient sample size, right? So how many observations are there? Obviously, like if the data comes from 100 people, that's worse than a data that comes from like 1 million people, right? Or even 1,000 or 10,000 people, right? So we need to make sure sample size is robust, right? And that depends on the country, right? So China, for example, has 1.4 billion people. So you can't just compare that with like Denmark, right? So you need more sample for sure to represent China, right? The second thing is also representation of the sample, right? So the world is so diverse, right? You have a lot of, even within a country like the UK, for example, you have different cultural groups, right? And you have different age groups as well, right? So obviously, like if your data and if your sample doesn't represent the age group or the cultural group, like let's say like 60% of the data is like 50-plus-year-olds, right? That doesn't make sense, right? So that data is flawed. That sample is flawed, right? So making sure that your sample is big enough and representative enough is the key, right? And if let's say that the data is not representative or it's not big enough, right? Obviously, when it's not big enough, you just get more, right? But if it's not representative, what we do is we usually like apply weightages or multipliers. So it's a bit technical, but that's what we do, right? So there are definitely ways to gain trust using math, right? But I think the other thing is also listening to your stakeholders, right? Because a lot of these decisions are emotional, like it's not just data, right? Basically, like their entire performance it can be tied to this data, right? So I think understanding that emotional aspect is also very important.
That makes complete sense. And like you said, everyone has their forte, everyone
Correct.
has their
Yes.
skill set.
Correct.
I mean, like the confidence to be able to do that and to have faith in your abilities and what you've learned is something that I feel like so many of us struggle with, because no matter how far into your career you are, you could be CEO, director level, like you are, like, and there's always that part where sometimes we're a bit wobbly, we're unsure, or we start to maybe second guess ourselves.
Right.
How do you cope in those moments? Like, how do you reassure yourself and relift yourself so someone who's watching this can look and say, like, if Bagas is able to do it in this way, maybe I can try the same thing?
I've definitely made a lot of mistakes, right, in the past. Like, I think no one's perfect, right? So I think my biggest mistake was not being completely honest with stakeholders, for example, because I think I was trying to really protect the method, but any method is also, it's like science, right? So basically, like anything can be there could be new discoveries or there could be new evidence, right? That proves that method wrong, for example. I think it's just like a balance of understanding that maybe that method can be improved, or like it's a lot of struggle because you want to protect your method, you want to protect your product, you know what I mean? So think of it as like a product. It is a product that we often have, right? So you want to protect the integrity of your product, but then people can just say, oh, that's not true, or that's wrong, right? Especially if this is so emotional, right? I think I should have been more honest, right? I think empathy is very important, right? Because we could have like discussed, okay, so I understand that this is your issue and this is my issue, you know, rather than just like not caring about how they feel about their perspective, you know. So I think that empathy, that honesty, I think that human connection, there you go, it goes back to that human connection and being real with people. But then again, of course, like I've mostly worked in like, you know, Gen Z, millennial driven companies, right? So I'm not sure how it goes in like other cultures, right? Other let's put it that way, other cultures. So, you know, I think yeah, honestly, empathy should work, but if it doesn't, then maybe try to reflect with others who understand. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I mean, I completely agree with you. I've always said millennials and Gen Zs, they're a different breed. Like we are very, very different.
Yes,
But
yes,
that
for
being
sure.
said, I think empathy is very universal. It goes across all cultures, industries, generations, everything you could think of. And
Yes,
it's very important. And I think sometimes even be able to have that personal connection, that people to people bond, it can help you in moments where you are feeling unsure. Speaking to someone and sharing that experience, you can uplift each other, you can learn from each other. There's so much to come from it.
and we're all in this together, right? So basically, like, I want to make sure that the data is correct and that the method is correct for you so that you can actually rely on it. You know what I mean? But sometimes there's that disagreements, right? And during those times, I think empathy is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. So going back a bit more to industry specific, so where do you see AI in the consumer world in the next 5 to 10 years?
Right, right. So that's a good question, right? So basically, I think um, again, like I said, AI is this system that like collects all the data and it provides like recommendations, right? Essentially, that mere humans maybe cannot even fathom, right? So I think AI will provide like recommendations to consumers based on multiple data sources uh, in real time. And I think, you know, for example, right? Um, Now you can already see like these refrigerators that have like internet connection, right? And they can actually know like when what kind of items that you buy based on either you putting the information yourself or it has a sensor maybe. And when it's running low, then the refrigerator can actually like tell you or even order for you if you do like online delivery, right? So things like that. And that's one on a very like individual like consumer level, right? If you're like an e-commerce company, for example, AI can really help you, for example, predict like what people will buy, right? With data from companies like ours, you know, um, and that prediction can actually help you one to plan better, right? Make sure you stock up better, and make sure that you have enough delivery riders or delivery couriers, right, to deliver the goods to different customers in different parts of the country, for example. And it can also reduce waste, right? So, for example, if you're an FMCG company that also sells online, right? You can actually plan the stock better, and you don't have to waste the food that wouldn't be sold otherwise, right? Because you have such good AI system to understand this and a lot of data, right? And to get that, you need like multiple data sources and a really good AI system, which I think will happen. It's already happening now, but it will happen way more often way more frequently in the next 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're saying essentially that we'll see like a greater level of convenience from a consumer perspective.
Yeah, for sure. I was looking at it from a data perspective, right? But yeah, from a consumer perspective, convenience, recommendations, customization, tailored to your needs and wants based on all the data that are out there. Yeah, that's out there.
Yeah, and it'll be super interesting as well to see how it will be in shaping organizations and how much faster organizations will be able to progress and develop and grow with the support of AI.
Yeah, for sure. But again, like I think it's also about connection again, right? Human connection. I think when you have these recommendations and all that, essentially what you are trying to be as a company, right, is you want to be the friend of your consumer, right? Because only friends know what you like. Only friends know like what you love the most, right? And what bugs you and all of that. And I think in some cultures, like a lot of Western countries, it's kind of like this. What's that book by George Orwell, 1984? Like that sort of like dystopia, right? Or whatever. Which I get why that is. Having like this sort of like system understands whatever you want and whoever you are. It could be scary, right? But I think, again, it goes back to what I was saying, like regulation is very important, right? Essentially, the whole point of marketing, the whole point of like consumer business is to understand and be as close as possible. So if AI can sort of replicate that human connection between a brand and consumers, then that's, I think, the whole point of it all. You know what I mean? It's not just about like AI as a system. It's also that human, quote unquote, human connection that you can get only through AI at a large scale.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting point. It's a lot of food for thought. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, we are already sadly at our last question. I feel like I could speak to you. You have so much knowledge. It's incredible. And this is one that I like to pose to everyone. That is a part of our series. And it is, how do you define success?
Right. Yeah, I think this conversation has turned into like a talk about human connection somehow, right? Like despite it about AI, right? Yeah, so I think human connection really matters to me a lot, right? I'm moving to the Netherlands because of my family, for example. So having the opportunity to work remotely for my current company, it was just the best thing ever, right? And I think success is having not just the financial resources, right? I think a lot of people often just tie it to the finances, right? But also like trust, I think, and respect that people give you because you know things, right? And you've helped them, and like I said, like I've made many mistakes, right? I mean, I think mistakes are really good teachers, right? And I think this is something that I've learned, right? Like those mistakes. And the biggest lesson again is this human connection, which I find to be what we need with more AI going forward too, right? And for example, right? A lot of people are saying that AI systems will help us work better, right? Which means that the remainder of the time you have more time to connect with people, right? To actually like talk to your team members more, or to do like mentorship, right? Or if you're an organization, right, you can actually talk between teams, which for a lot of companies, like it is an issue because a lot of the time, like you don't have time to talk to other teams in the company, right? Because you're so busy, you're so busy. And when you don't talk to other teams, you don't really see the bigger picture. You know what I mean? Like, for example, you're just in finance and you don't talk to like people in HR, but you don't realize that, these are related, right? For example. So I think that human connection will definitely be more, well, not definitely, but hopefully be more in the future. And yeah, and that's how I see my success as well. Yeah. that connection.
That's lovely. Thank you for sharing that. It's something you hear quite often. I think as time goes on, people of course want to build a career, and like you said at the start of the interview about you want to change the world, you want to make impact. But I think along the way, everybody learns that it's so important to surround yourself with good people and form good relationships.
Yeah. And I want to correct my stereotype about engineers, okay? Before all the engineers come at me. I think they're so great. Don't get me wrong, but going back to what I said, right? I think a lot of them are so busy. You know what I mean? They're so busy and they don't have time to like talk to people, right? So when you have a good AI, it can help engineers to do their job better, and it frees up their time, right? So it will leave more human connection again, right? Even for engineers, you know. So yeah. So let me correct myself there before I get canceled by engineers.
Absolutely. I'm sure you will be fine. I agree with what you said, makes perfect sense. Everyone, that human connection you speak of, it can be built in so many different ways. Different personalities collaborate with different personalities. Human connection is always capable. So don't worry. I don't think anyone's going to cancel you. All good.
Ooh, hopefully.
No, that's amazing. Thank you. And it's such a powerful way to end as well.
Happy to be here. Happy to share all the things I know. Yeah.